The final item of business today is a members' business debate on motion number 3413 in the name of Roderick Campbell on the Vivarium Trust and co-housing for older people. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put. Would those members who wish to speak in the debate please press the request to speak buttons now or as soon as possible. And I call on Roderick Campbell to open the debate. Mr. Campbell, if you're ready, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First of all, I welcome members of the Vivarium Trust who are in the gallery for the debate. Hugh Hoffman, Margaret Farrell, Erica Topluska and Senya Bate. Thank you. And I'd also thank the MSP colleagues who've stayed behind here for this debate today. I'm pleased that we're able to have this debate today and to bring the work of the Vivarium Trust and the benefits of co-housing to the Scottish Parliament's attention, following on from their exhibition earlier in the year. The Vivarium Trust was set up in 2007 to promote co-housing through the provision of information and advice. The Trust believes that co-housing offers a new and better way of living for older people. The model is an affordable, self-managed form of living that combines the autonomy and privacy of individual households with a sense of community and mutual support. The Vivarium Trust plans to establish a pilot project in North East Fife so that they can demonstrate how co-housing works in action, and so they can test the practicalities and offer a new model of housing which they hope will encourage others across Scotland and the UK. I'm delighted today to announce to Parliament that the Vivarium Trust is in the process of setting up a partnership with Kingdom Housing Association to establish their pilot project in the St Andrews area of North East Fife. What, you may ask, is co-housing? Well, by way of background, the original concept of co-housing originated in Denmark with the first attempt to build a co-housing community beginning in the winter of 1964 when Danish architect Jan Gudmund Højer gathered a group of friends to discuss housing options. The concept really found its footing in Denmark in the 1970s, and today there are many well-established co-housing projects there. There's also a continued growth in new co-housing communities in Denmark, and the concept has been incorporated into the master plans for many larger developments. In the UK, there are co-housing projects in Dorset and Spring Hill, although not specifically for the over 50s. The concept has spread across the globe with co-housing projects in the Netherlands, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Canada, and the USA. It's no surprise that this is the case, as each home is designed for the individual, but it exists within a community that contains communal facilities based on the preferences and needs of its members. The communal facilities are often in the form of a common house that contains areas for leisure, socialising, office space, gardens and workshops. Every co-housing community has different needs, but they're all defined by the same characteristics. They're defined by the democratic process. Residents lead co-housing projects through the various stages of development and then manage the community through a democratic structure. All co-housing communities are designed for people. The community is designed by and for its residents, and separate households exist, but they all share common goals. The central tenet of co-housing, therefore, is the shared facilities, often in the form of a common house that is the heart and hub of every co-housing community. The shared facilities may differ in every co-housing community, and some communities often open up their common space to the wider community around them. The co-housing model offers a variety of benefits for those who choose to become involved in a project, and they also provide the opportunity to create an active community amongst their membership. The Vivarium Trust was set up to demonstrate why co-housing is an important and additional living model for older people. Research has shown that many of the housing options currently available to older people do not meet their needs, certainly not the needs of an increasingly active older generation who wish to retain their independence for as long as possible. With the current financial climate, it's understandable that more and more older people want to retain their independence, but still require affordable housing. The co-housing model, therefore, offers older people the chance to minimise their living costs through energy efficiency measures, ecological design and the sharing of facilities. And the projects can maximise their own income through social enterprise projects, such as selling on any surplus renewable energy that they may generate through their energy efficiency measures. It's important to be mindful of the benefits of co-housing for older people beyond reducing their living costs. Far too often, older people feel isolated from their community. Co-housing therefore offers companionship and mutual support instead of isolation. It allows the individual to feel a sense of belonging and of community. And the model allows older people to have an ongoing and active responsibility for their own circumstance, which aids in promoting their mental and physical well-being. As I previously highlighted, the Vivarium Trust are in the process of setting up a partnership with Kingdom Housing Association. The pilot project will be an intentional community for the over 50s based on the co-housing model. The plans include a proposal to include 25 to 30 different sized self-contained dwellings, purpose-built or adapted on ecological principles, but all designed with ageing in mind. The whole project will be designed with sustainability in mind, not just in the ecological sense, but also in the social and economic sense. And this will permeate through every stage, from the initial planning application through to ongoing living within the development. The proposed amenities for the pilot will include areas for socialising, alongside a kitchen/oblique dining area, a library, an office/oblique computer room, a laundry room and gardens. There's also the possibility that the project will have a small-scale leisure facility. In keeping with the principles of co-housing, members of the pilot project will be fully responsible for every stage of the development. The project will act as a demonstration project to show the general public, both young and old, the practicalities and benefits of sustainable living within a co-housing community. The Vivarium Trust hopes that the project can then demonstrate exactly how co-housing can be applied across Scotland and the UK. Currently, the Vivarium Trust has a committed group of approximately 20 members who are committed to becoming members of the pilot project and are already looking forward to the design of the Common House. There are many other members who are committed to various degrees, and the Trust is continuously looking to recruit new members. I can only hope that this debate will assist them with that goal. The work that the Trust is undertaking is clearly incredibly worthy, and they've been mindful of developing the project so it will make a positive contribution to the Scottish Government's national objectives. It's hoped that the pilot will provide an example of how housing can be developed to aid Scotland in becoming a healthier, fairer and greener society. I'm pleased, therefore, to have been able to focus the Parliament's attention on the Trust and co-housing, and I welcome and congratulate their work and the work they have already undertaken to publicise the benefits of co-housing and in the project in North East Fife, and wish them every success in the future. And thank you also to cross-party support to enable this debate to take place. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
And thank you. I now call on Dr Elaine Murray to be followed by Fiona MacLeod. Around 4 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I'm not particularly familiar with the Vivarium Trust itself, other than that it had an exhibition in Parliament earlier this year, and indeed from the very interesting speech we just heard, which has given us a lot more examples of it. But I think co-housing obviously is one model which was developed in Scandinavia, but there are actually similar types of community development accommodating people with shared interests of specific or of mixed age groups. And I really, I suppose, in my contribution, want to reflect on some of the benefits of those, some of the benefits, indeed, of the more familiar varieties of those that we know, and I actually use those to highlight why that type of development, of which co-housing is one example, is particularly helpful for people. Actually, my own sister lives in something sort of similar. It's not actually a co-housing project, but it's in Tunbridge Wells. I don't think she ever signed herself as disgusted, however, but in her particular large house, they have several owner-occupiers owning flats, which are their own individual flats, but they also, as everybody's a member of the committee, they make decisions about how the house is maintained, how the gardens are maintained, and various other things. From what she says, it can have its frustrations as well as its benefits, however. And of course, where a lot of us are familiar with the sort of accommodation for older people, such as retirement housing, sheltered housing, and very sheltered housing, which may indeed be owner-occupied or it may be socially rented, but I think have many of the same benefits as you've been describing in terms of the Vivarium Trust. I know particularly I've been around most of the ones in my constituency over the years, and I've always been particularly taken with the way in which the residents, many residents who are in their 90s in some of this type of accommodation, and may have physical disabilities are extremely lively, and there's, I have to say, always a contrast from meeting people in that type of accommodation or going into a residential care home in terms of the outlook on life. I know many of them have their own committees which organise outings and social events, and all residents are doing that for themselves. Indeed, I went to a Scottish evening earlier in the year at one of the retirement housing complexes in my constituency. I went there at 6:30 thinking that because it was older people, some of them were in their 90s, and might not want to be up all night and might not want folk hanging around. I left at 9:30. I was told later on that the event had gone on till 3 o'clock in the morning. I also had heard that the same happened at Hogmanay, and I think actually at the end of this year I might well be going along trying to get an invitation, because they seem to be having a heck of a lot more fun at Hogmanay than I was this year, I have to say. We heard this morning at the Finance Committee that, that housing is a cornerstone of preventative spend, and that investment in housing adaptations can save the health service much greater sums of money through preventing emergency admissions to hospital for older people, or indeed admission to residential care. And some interesting statistics around that, and maybe seem to go slightly off what we're saying, but I think it's actually relevant to the co-housing debate as well, where people are designing things according to their own needs, because the all-party parliamentary group on housing and care for older people at Westminster said the average cost to the state of a fractured hip where somebody falls is nearly 5 times the cost of a major housing adaptation, and 100 times the cost of fitting grab rails or rails of that sort. And when I went to one of my Hanover Trust sheltered housing developments, I got a copy of the research they did, which found that for an average cost of $2,800 in adaptations, the Scottish Health and Social Care System could save an average of over 10,000, or equivalent to 483 hours of home care, or 19 weeks of care with nursing staff, or 2 orthopaedic operations. I think when we look at that level of savings, we can see how appropriate housing, of which co-housing is one model, can make a huge difference actually to not only to the lives of older people, but to indeed the interventions they require from the health service and from the social care services in the future. And therefore all such developments, I think, are very much to be welcomed.
Excellent. Many, many thanks. I now call on Fiona MacLeod to be followed by Alex Johnson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And can I begin by thanking Rod Campbell by bringing this debate to Parliament today, but also for inviting the Vivarium Trust to have their stall a few months ago. I found it absolutely fascinating to learn about it. And I wanted to be put in the debate today more to listen and learn than to have a real strong contribution. But if I tell you about the population statistics in my constituency, you'll understand why I want to listen and learn so much about housing that will help us as we grow older. Presently, 60 to 74-year-olds and 75-plus years across East Dunbartonshire are 2% above the national average. But the projections for 2035 from the Registrar General show a decline in all age groups across populations in East Dunbartonshire, which encompasses Strathkelvin and Bearsden, my constituency, except for 65 to 74-year-olds and 75-plus years. And for 75-plus years, we are facing an explosion in population from currently 9,196 to 17,090 people aged 75-plus, living well, long and healthy lives, but lives that need housing that's appropriate to their needs. And one of the things that really struck me was that in terms of households across East Dunbartonshire, those with someone aged 75-plus living in them by 2035 will have risen by 88%. So it tells you something about the housing needs in my constituency. Currently in Strathkelvin and Bearsden, there are 423 sheltered housing properties. 423 sheltered housing properties for, in 20 years' time, 17,000 people aged over 75+. So you can see my interest in this debate and in what the Vivarium Trust are doing. I'm so delighted to hear it's going to be a project that we can actually all go along and see and learn from. I mean, reading up for this debate was so exciting to find out 8% of Danes live in co-housing. It's happening already and in good numbers. There's 230 co-housing schemes in the Netherlands. So it's not something that is just, pie in the sky. It's really working. But I got so excited the more I read about it, and I think a lot of my constituents will as well, because the idea that an intentional community which combines the autonomy and privacy of the individual household with the mutual support offered through a degree of collaborative living, I think that's right up my street, and it's right up the street of many of my constituents. I can see myself, and I came across a lovely quote that said that you really have to start thinking about this in your 50s and 60s so that it's there for when you really need it. And I intend to go out with my dog walking group, a bunch of women in their mid-50s who had the sense to have dogs and not late babies, and talk about us becoming an intentional community and working on co-housing for our group. Because, of course, we might not want a communal house, we'll want a communal kennel. But I am being serious, because some of the things that I've learned I think are so exciting. The fact that from inception, design, detailed planning, building and development, through to the ongoing operation, it's managed by the members themselves in a fully participative manner. That is right up my street, and I'm sure many of my constituents. It's interesting to learn that co-housing for older people is now incorporated as an option in the national housing policies of both Denmark and the Netherlands. And I hope to be able to explore this further with the Scottish Government, with the very particular needs of my constituency and its growing elderly population. Thank you very much, and thank you again to Rod Campbell.
Thank you. Now call on Alex Johnson to be followed by Claire Adamson.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. I too would like to congratulate Roderick Campbell on having brought this motion before Parliament for debate tonight. In fact, it's a subject which I have heard of in the past, but one I feel quite guilty about not knowing more about today. And as with previous speakers, I hope that by the end of this debate, I will have been properly focused on this subject and will be able to do more. In fact, the more I read my notes, the more I realise that, in fact, this is quite an attractive prospect for someone like me. However, my plan was to look at it for something in the distant future, because I, being a young man, you understand, in my own mind I'm still a slim 21-year-old, but the problem is that we do need to think about these things earlier. And I would have to say that my research contained the same quote that was just used a moment ago. However, there was a figure missed out. So I'd like to read the full quote to just demonstrate the full horror. And that is that co-housing, first created in Denmark in the 1970s, and currently around 8% of Danes aged over 50 live in co-housing. And that is an indication to me that I'm not as young as I thought I was, and it's about time I started to think of these things. However, we in this country like to do the best for our older people. And quite often, with the best of motivations, we end up doing things that are not exactly what we set out to achieve. We now work very hard to keep older people in their own homes, to keep them in the communities that they've traditionally lived in. But the problem with that is that as they get older, in traditional housing, they become isolated. And many of our older people who don't suffer a particular disadvantage, either health-wise or in terms of access to the community around them, do find themselves increasingly isolated simply by their increasing years. In fact, what we're doing, by doing the right thing, is in fact sentencing many of our old people to an old age in solitary confinement. And that's why a principle like co-housing is something which could deliver so much more. The opportunity for older people to work together and to ensure that their needs are properly catered for without the necessity for continual round-the-clock nursing or observation is something which will, I believe, give the opportunity for people to maintain their independence, but as they get older, simply become dependent on each other to ensure that their privacy can be maintained, their decorum can be maintained, and yet they are never alone and they are never left without observation at least. These changing needs are something which we do need to recognise, and as with previous speakers, I am fully aware that the number of people in the older age groups will continue to rise dramatically in years to come. And should I be lucky enough to live into my 70s or perhaps my 80s, I expect to be part of a very much larger cohort than those age groups could provide today. For that reason, I genuinely believe that this opportunity to move forward with the proposal that the Bavarian Trust have brought forward and the opportunity to look at that pilot and its results will have the effect of allowing us to change our attitude towards housing of older people, to allow us to pool resources, to maintain the independence and the sanctity of individuals in their old age, and ensure that when I'm older, I'll have a really interesting place to stay. I look forward to that opportunity, and I look forward to learning further during the course of this debate.
Many thanks. Now call on Claire Adamson, after which we'll move to the Minister to close.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I also thank Roderick Campbell for bringing this debate to the Chamber this evening and highlighting the work of the Bavarian Trust. As someone born and raised in Lanarkshire and living close to New Lanark, it's no surprise that I do have some interest in placemaking founded on the principles of the cooperative movement. And yet, we still have such a long way to go, despite New Lanark's beginnings in 1784. I hope you'll indulge me when I talk about it a little bit. David Dale was already a successful businessman and one who benefited from the surge of trade from tobacco and textiles in Glasgow in the late 1800s, when he founded the mills in New Lanark. He was considered an ethical employer of his time and by the standard of that day. But it was the succession of his son-in-law, Robert Owen, into the control of the business that was truly transformational. New Lanark wasn't about workers' houses. It was about establishing a community, placemaking in the true sense of the process and philosophy. New Lanark gained an international reputation for social and educational reform. And another first for Scotland, it had the world's first infant school. It also had a creche, free medical care, and a comprehensive education system for its children, and lifelong learning opportunities with evening classes for adults. So many of these values we still hold dear, and so many of them we debate in this chamber to this day. It also offered leisure and recreation opportunities. They were integral to the design, with opportunities to attend concerts and go to the dancing. And all this set in the tranquil and beautiful landscape of Lanarkshire, nestled at Coral Inn in the Falls of Clyde. Presiding Officer, I would like to quote from Robert Owen's address to his workers on New Year's Day in 1816. He said, "I know that society may be formed so as to exist without crime, without poverty, with health greatly improved, with little, if any, misery, and with intelligence and happiness increased 100-fold. And no obstacle whatsoever intervenes at this moment except ignorance to prevent such a state of society becoming universal." Well, Presiding Officer, unfortunately, I think as society has been ignorant for too long. And that's why I welcome the enlightenment of the Bavarian Trust and their pilot programme for Scotland. It's a cooperative movement which, by appropriate placemaking, seeks a better way of living for older people, who will be able to access affordable, self-managed living and accommodation appropriate to their needs. It will be a supportive environment, a community offering recreational facilities and social inclusion. It will also be built on the principle of participation, with residents involved at design stages. It will be built on ethical and ecological efficiency standards, where the build quality will ensure affordable homes with low heating overheads. But, Presiding Officer, should this not be the blueprint for all our housing? And there are fantastic examples, as detailed by Dr Elaine Murray. And I would include in that the Grodians development in Lerwick and Shetland, and also the Blackwood homes in Calisona in my own hometown of Wishaw, which support disabled residents. Is it not incumbent on all housing associations and local government to build and design our homes and living communities with community cohesion at the very core? Perhaps then we can truly aspire to the example, the cooperative ideals and the utopian dreams of Robert Owen nearly 200 years ago.
Thank you very much. I now call on Margaret Burgess to wind up the debate on behalf of the Government. Minister, up to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I would also like to congratulate Rod Campbell on securing this debate and thank him for drawing wider attention to the work of the Vivarium Trust. It's publicising and developed the co-housing for older people. And I also welcome the members of the Trust who have come here today in the public gallery. The motion provides the opportunity to highlight the benefits of co-housing in enabling older people to live independently in a community with mutual support and control. It also allows me to set out the Government's wider work on housing and support for older people, to which the work of the Vivarium contributes. Age, Home and Community is our 10-year strategy for housing in Scotland for Scotland's older people, and it was published in December last year. And we were delighted to be able to include the work of the Vivarium Trust to develop co-housing in Scotland as a case study. And we've heard, I think, from Fiona MacLeod and from Alec Johnson, the challenge of the ageing population. It's forecast that the number of people aged 75 and over is expected to increase by 82% by 2035. And I think it's also important to know that was mentioned that the Vivarium Trust are looking at this from age 50 and over, because we maybe should be thinking about it and before it's too late. And I think the other important thing for me we've heard about the Vivarium Trust, which I think Claire Adamson has summed up very well there, is in terms of being involved in the project from start to finish. Because, and certainly in my short time as Housing Minister, what I've found when I'm going round housing associations and developments, new developments, are the ones that have been involved, the tenants and the community are the most successful, and they're a comfortable place to be even when you arrive at the development. And I think that's what we get from what has been proposed by the Vivarium Trust. Who knows better what's required than those that are going to be living there? And also, you know, the design of the homes and everything. And I think that's very significant. And as Claire Adamson said, we should be looking at that across all our housing. We also continue to face the tough economic conditions with real-term reductions in the Scottish budget of over 11% in 4 years. And that's over £3 billion. It's not insubstantial. It's therefore vital that we have the right housing and support for older people. Getting this right will enhance people's quality of life and well-being. It will also make better use of our resources by reducing the number of falls and other accidents in the home and consequent emergency hospital admissions. Our national strategy for housing for older people is built around 4 themes which are exemplified in the co-housing model. Older people as an asset, choice, planning ahead and preventative support. And our starting point was that older people consistently tell us they want to remain living in their own homes, in their own communities, for as long as possible. And it's right that they, like anyone else, should have this choice. It doesn't just benefit older people if they're able to live independently in their own homes. Our wider society also benefits. Scotland's older people are an asset. Co-housing provides an environment where older people can remain active. And we heard from, I think, Dr Elaine Murray about the activity in some of the older people's housing complexes in her area, and it sounds very interesting. I think we'd all like to join the parties there. Older people contribute to their communities and they retain control over their own lives. And I should be clear that there's no single model of housing and support that meets the needs of all older people. And again, I think that has been highlighted. Older people are as diverse as any other section of society, with differing needs and expectations that reflect their individual life experiences. This means we need to have a range of different types of housing and support services which will meet these needs and expectations. Co-housing is one of the newer and more innovative housing models that we are keen to encourage. It showcases age-appropriate design, affordability, and, as we've heard, energy efficiency, and a mutually supportive community. One of the central themes of our work in housing and support for older people is prevention. Its importance is widely recognised, including in the Christie Commission report and in our response renewing Scotland's public services. We can't pretend that we can always prevent falls or deterioration in health, However, there are many preventative services related to housing which support well-being and reduce the likelihood of traumatic and costly hospital and care home admissions. Co-housing demonstrates many of the features of the best preventative support services for older people in terms of the control it gives residents and its personalisation to their individual circumstances. The publication of our National Strategy for Housing for Older People was an important milestone. It was put together with the help and support of a number of housing and older people's organisations, including the Vivarium Trust, as well, very importantly, as older people themselves. The strategy didn't mark the end of our work. In many ways, it's just the beginning. As a government, we are committed to the development of preventative support services for older people. We are also considering options for the future delivery and funding of housing adaptations, which play a key role in helping older people to maintain independent living. And I think we heard also today about the evidence that was put to the Finance Committee on that very matter. So inclusion, older people's issues have rightly gained prominence in the housing agenda. We need to sustain the momentum we have built up and increase it as we implement our strategy and deliver our vision. With its major contribution to the development of co-housing in Scotland, the Vivarium Trust is part of the rich mix of housing and support that we are seeking to build to help enable older people to live independently. I have been delighted to hear about the progress that has been made, and I will follow the pilot with interest. And tonight I would like to wish Vivarium well as they continue their work to develop co-housing in Fife. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now close this meeting of Parliament. Thank you.